So we are still in this. We are still in this together of just adjusting to this new normal. You know, it seems that things they've changed, but now it's like, well, this is what it is now. And we want to predict an end, but it's like, well, we don't know when that's going to be. But it's just kind of weird now. It's like this new normal of how you interact with people. And for me, being an extrovert, and my first reaction when I see someone is like, let's hang out. But now it's stay away. And, it's just this new way of adjusting to interaction with people. Now you have like the COVID elbow bump, or the COVID fist pump, or the air high five. And it's just weird. Now you see it on sports events now. They're like pretending to high five each other. It's just this weird new reality. My wife and I were watching a movie, and they showed a scene of an airplane, the people on an airplane, and what she said was, "Look, no one's wearing a mask." I was like, "Wow, yeah, you're right. No one. It's just this. Now it's weird now to see movies that where no one's wearing masks and people are hugging." And I walked into a grocery store and I had forgotten to wear my mask. I just totally slipped my mind, and I didn't realize it until I started to get dirty looks from people, and realized that they were staring at me, and then I realized, I don't have a mask. I felt like I was caught naked or something. Like it was like, I'm so sorry. And I turned around and went back to my car to get my mask. It's just like this new reality. Now walking in somewhere without a mask feels weird. It's like, whoa, what is this? And I'm crazy, But that's just where we are. And, but here's the thing. Beyond that, it's the struggles that now have come out of that, of dealing with kids now that in the house all the time, and trying to do learning through a screen, through Zoom, and trying to have all the kids on a screen and all at one time, and making sure the internet works. And it's just, I don't even want to count the hours my kids have been on screens throughout all of this. It's just where we are. And can I just say, let's just give each other grace. Give yourself grace in this time. Like, this is unprecedented time. So just give yourself grace. When you get hard on yourself about something, or, you want to beat yourself up for thinking a certain way, just give yourself grace and just know that this it's okay. We're in a difficult time. So give yourself grace. I want to share with you a passage in Scripture where the disciples with Jesus experience a difficult time. And I think in some ways it can relate to what we're experiencing right now, of what to do when you go through problems. Maybe such the problems that you're experiencing right now. It happens in the book of Mark 4. And beginning of this is when Jesus had just recruited his disciples, and they were in the process of getting to know who Jesus was, of who he really is, and what his agenda really was too. And again, they knew that Jesus was just a one who had been born in Bethlehem, this little teeny town. He was born and put into a feeding trough surrounded by animals. He was raised in a no-name town of Nazareth, and he was the son of a carpenter. And now Jesus is doing things that they've really never seen anyone do before. He's forgiving people of their sins and preaching to large crowds, and speaking with authority. And they are now discovering a little bit about who this Jesus was. But here's the thing. Jesus goes back to his hometown of Nazareth, and the people there, his own people, they tried to bring him aside. And it says in Mark 3 that it says that they said he's lost his senses. Lost his senses. They said this about Jesus, that he's lost his senses. And think about it for a second. That if you had a friend that you grew up with your entire life, and at age 30, he went off and began to preach to large crowds, and you heard that he was forgiving people of their sins. And I mean, can you imagine getting a call from like a mutual friend and being like, "Hey, did you hear about Jesus? He's all over the news. Like, Yeah, it's crazy. He's preaching to hundreds of people. He's forgiving people of their sins. And it's like, man, I always kind of thought Jesus was a couple pancakes short of a stack. But, I mean, this is a whole nother level, right? And then what happens, he comes home, and says, can you imagine then, like, seeing Jesus after he's been gone, and you're like, Jesus, hey, man, how you been? Where have you been? And all of a sudden you look, and you're like, hey, who are these 12 people following you? Who are these? And Jesus says, oh, these are my disciples. And you're like, oh, okay. You're right. He is crazy, right? This is just how his hometown people thought. But nevertheless, Jesus goes on to teach in parables. And these parables are these earthly stories with eternal meanings. And it says that Jesus took his disciples aside and he explained these parables in detail. And this one event occurs after that his disciples are about to experience who Jesus is. They go from a teaching, and then Jesus is about to do something they've never seen before and see him in a light that they've never seen him in prior to this. And his disciples are about to experience once and for all who this Jesus teacher really is. It happens in chapter 4, towards the end of the chapter, when they begin to cross the Sea of Galilee. Look with me here in Mark 4:35 through 36. This is what happens. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Now, this was the Sea of Galilee, and it was not surprising for a storm of this magnitude to happen. In fact, many of the disciples were fishermen, and so they were used to charting the waters of this. The Sea of Galilee was 700 feet below sea level, and it's surrounded by mountains. And what happens is, without warning, winds from the east come in, and a storm can happen out of nowhere without any warning from the clouds. And here's the truth of this, and here's what I want you to see. That the surprising event in this is not that the storm happened. The surprising event is the storm happened when they were with Jesus. These disciples were in the middle of God's will, doing the very thing that he had called them to do, and yet it wasn't without problems. Here's the other thing I want you to get, is that who commanded the disciples to cross? Who commanded? It was Jesus, wasn't it? It was Jesus who initiated the crossing. And what did Jesus say? His command was, let's go to the other side. To the other side. Jesus had the end in mind. His goal was to get to the other side of the lake, to continue to do ministry, to continue to further his agenda in the world, for people to come to know who he is. But yet, there was a storm waiting. See, Jesus had the end in mind, even though the storm was in sight. And it wasn't as if it was Jesus' goal for them to experience a storm. No. But the storm was a part of the journey for Jesus to get the disciples of where they needed to be. It was a part of the journey. It was a part of going to the place that Jesus had called them to go. It was a part of the mission, the greater mission that was ahead, of Jesus continuing to reveal to people who he is. And the storm was a part of the journey that they encountered. And instead of Jesus just trying to get through the storm to the other side, he instead used the storm to reveal who he is in a way that they had never seen before. See, oftentimes it's It's easy sometimes, or it's comforting at times to think that if we just follow Jesus, then everything will work out. If we just obey, then we won't have any problems. And here's the thing, I've been guilty of that too. I mean, I've even, I think, and sometimes said that to people. Hey, just follow Jesus and you won't have the problems you're experiencing. You ever thought that way? You ever thought that somehow that maybe problems exist because you're not following Jesus as closely as you need to? And only if you did that somehow the problems would go away? The truth is, you don't see that in Scripture. You don't see that in the life of Jesus. I mean, after all, if there was any place to be that would protect you from storms, wouldn't it be in the presence of Jesus? But it's not. And here's what I know, and I'm sure you may know this too, that Jesus doesn't promise a life of comfort. He doesn't promise us a life free of problems and pain. But he does promise his presence. That in the midst of our problems and that in the midst of our pain, we have the presence of an almighty God with us. And when we have the presence of Jesus, we have the opportunity to experience peace in the midst of the storms that we encounter. I want to read what happens next in Mark 4 later on. Mark 4:38, what's what happens after. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." What I love about this account that beforehand that the gospel writer gives so much detail to the event that he says that Jesus was asleep. Not only was he asleep, but his head was on a pillow. I love that. I mean, it points to the accuracy of the event, of that such detail was given. And then afterwards, it said that the disciples said, "Don't you care that we're going to drown? Don't you care that we're going to drown?" The disciples had already forecasted their fate. They had already concluded what was going to happen before it happened. They had already thought to themselves, I guess through some sort of reasoning or what they've experienced before. I imagine they've recalled stories of friends of theirs who were fishermen, that the great storm on the Sea of Galilee came and their boat capsized and they drowned themselves. I imagine they knew those stories. And so I guess through their reasoning, they were taking those stories and the circumstances that surrounded them and put two and two together and said, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to take place. All the while missing the fact that Jesus, who had all power and authority, was in their midst. One who had power over their circumstance. The one who had the power to silence it all. And he did. Jesus used the experience as a way to reveal himself in a way that they've never experienced before. But they didn't, at the time they didn't know. And it's easy for us now to read this story 2,000 years later and to think, why were they afraid? Like, we know what happened. We know that Jesus calmed the storm. In fact, we knew all the other things, the miracles that Jesus did. But at the time, they didn't. So it's easy for us to look at it and just read on like it's no big deal. Because we've seen what Jesus is going to do. We know. But they didn't. They didn't truly know who Jesus was. But here's the thing. It took the storm to reveal to them who he was. See, Jesus just didn't try to get through the storm, but he used the storm to reveal who he was. Isn't that true in our lives as well? Isn't that true that the storms of our life, the problems of our life reveal our faith? See, problems don't create character, they reveal it. Problems and pain, they don't reveal faith, or they don't create faith, they reveal it. And Jesus is using this time to reveal who he is so that they know who's in their midst. But here's the thing. I find myself just like those disciples time and time again. I imagine you do as well. You get the unexpected bill in the mail and you think, this is it. This is bankruptcy. This is it. We're going to have to sell our home. We're going to be homeless. We get the report from the doctor and think, this is it. This is how it's going to be. We put more faith in the doctors than we do in our Savior. A tragic event happens in your life, and you think, I'm going to feel this way forever. I'm never going to get over this. And we forget that we serve an almighty, powerful God who is with us. Maybe you're in a job and you think that you don't like and you don't want to be in, and you think, well, this is it. This is the job I'm going to have forever. I might as well just learn to like it. Don't hope for anything more. This is the way it's going to be. And we forget. We forget to put our faith in Jesus and not our circumstances. And instead of living in the faith that we do have, we speak in the fear and we live in the fear that we experience in the moment. In other words, we worry. You ever been there? I read an article that was published last year by Melanie Greenberg, PhD, in Psychology Today. And she researched the worry and the cause of it. And what she found is that what it's called is ruminating. That's what we do. We ruminate on something. And really, it's that they conclude is it's a means of control. To get control in the moment, in the midst of chaos, and in order to get control, we worry to gain some sort of control. That's what the disciples did, right? To get control of what's happening, they went ahead and forecasted their fate. Well, this is what's going to happen because they think, well, if I formulate my fate, then I can control it. Then it won't happen unexpectedly. And she goes on to write that some people think that if they just stop worrying and ruminating on something and just relax, then something unforeseen that's devastating will catch them by surprise. And so we think that if we continue to worry, then we won't be caught off guard by the problems of life. And she described it like a soldier pacing in front of a palace to guard it, that our thoughts pace back and forth to guard us against unforeseen danger. There's an excerpt from the article I want to read. She says this in an article. Worry and rumination are the result of a feedback loop between your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex. Now, your amygdala is the part that's in the back of your head, and it's responsible for the fight or flight response. It's that knee-jerk reaction or that knee-jerk feeling of fear that we experience when a problem happens. That's the amygdala. But the prefrontal cortex is in the front of your head, and that's responsible for reasoning, for decision making. And then it says what happens is it gets in a feedback loop. It says when your amygdala sends out its alarm signals, your prefrontal cortex analyzes the alarm or worry, and then instead of calming down your amygdala, comes up with other things that might go wrong. You ever been there? This creates a vicious cycle of escalating and self-perpetuating worry. there's that cycle that happens, doesn't it? Where danger occurs and our bodies react, or our brains react in the way that it should, and then it sends that message, and instead of calming it down, or in other words, instead of reminding our minds of what is reality, in the sense of that we serve a powerful God who is in control and has more authority than the problems we encounter, we begin to reason more problems or more what-if possible scenarios. And it goes back and forth, fear and more reasoning, fear and more reasoning, fear and more reasoning, problem, more problems. And it's this vicious cycle again and again and again. And that's what we see in the disciples. They had an alarming event, rightly so. They got scared, totally normal. And then what happened is they began to reason of, okay, let's plan this out. They started to use their prefrontal cortex. Let's play this out. What's going to happen? Oh, we're going to die. Ah! And it just goes back and forth, to the point they've lost all sense of reality. And they've lost all their faith. What little they had. What were they doing? The disciples were trying to control. They were trying to gain control of the situation because they were so scared. And instead of relying on Jesus, they took matters into their own hands to try to figure it out. And then Jesus reveals himself in a way that they've never experienced before. And all of a sudden, they realize, wow, he's powerful. They even say that who is this man, they asked. Who is this man? They didn't know before, but now they know. They didn't have a clue before. They had a little bit. But now, because Jesus used the storm to reveal who he was in a way they've never experienced before, they had more knowledge of who this Jesus person was. And the reality of what they said was, they asked each other, even the wind and the waves obey him. Even the wind and the waves. See, for the disciples, Jesus went from a person that was just born in a little town of Bethlehem, placed in a feeding trough, grew up in a no-name city of Nazareth, son of a carpenter. Now, to one who had great power and authority over anything they can ever experience. Don't miss this. Don't miss this. Listen. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you're experiencing, we serve a God who is working not despite it, but he's working in it. Don't miss it. Don't miss this. We serve a God who is in the business of bringing us closer to him in the midst of our chaos, so that we experience him in a way we've never before. So what about you? What is it that's happening right now that you think, this is a problem that's never going to go away? This is a situation that's never going to change. This is the job I have. This is what my circumstances are. This is my financial situation. This is just what it is. These are my problems. This is what I worry about. In those moments, would we stop forecasting what our humanly mind tells us, but would we live in the faith of knowing that we serve a God who is all-powerful and has all authority, and he isn't surprised by your problems. He isn't worried about what's going to happen. But he is with you in it. And he is working through it to make you who he wants you to be by revealing himself in ways that you've never seen before. We serve a great God. We serve a great God. So next time, don't speak your fear. No, you speak your faith. You declare out loud, listen, this isn't what I want to be experiencing, but I believe God is working. The next time you're scared, you acknowledge it. Acknowledge your fear. But don't forecast it. No, you allow your faith to take over and believe that I serve a God who is with me and He is for me and He is in the business of working through this situation to reveal how powerful He is in ways that I've never seen before, so that I can have a testimony of telling people, let me tell you about Jesus and what He did. You think the disciples did that? Oh yeah. There were other people with them in other boats. You think they left and told stories about Jesus? Oh yeah. Have faith and believe that in the midst of our storms, that God is working. And He's in the business of bringing us closer and closer to Him through it, so that we experience Him in ways we've never before, so that He is glorified, so that He is praised, so that we tell stories of how God used and worked through our pain to reveal who He is in ways we've never seen before. Let's have faith.